You made it to Chapter 7, the everything engine and the master-slave potential of physical processing. Let's get started. This is how you are physically put together. The model just shows this more explicitly, like a set of Russian nesting dolls. You start with your whole physical body as the biggest container. Inside that is your endocrine system. Inside that is your whole brain/intellect. Your brain then has embedded in it the ego. Inside that, the superego. And inside that, the id. With the final piece at the bottom being your central core. This physical stacking comes with master and slave relationship rules, whereas the working cooperative model is governed by statistics or quantum rules. The master-slave relationship or rule model is the one we are most familiar with, and it is the model that is most obvious. If you look at any anatomy book, this is what you will find: the physical stacking of the layers. And you are not supposed to deny obvious visual evidence. If this wasn't true, no science could be done based on observation. And yet, this is how it has been done for hundreds of years. But it is ironically the obviousness of the master-slave model over the cooperative model that has caused humans to be biased towards believing that the master-slave model is superior. The master-slave model seems more intuitive. It is more easily accessible than believing in things like the cooperative math of statistics. That requires a kind of faith in math, or rather, faith in other human beings. A trust that others will do their part. This is really what tool the cooperative model is able to take advantage of. But faith in math or people isn't something people gain without direct experience. Statistically speaking, cooperative models utilize all best practices for the highest benefit of the most aspects or people, which does result in stronger group outcomes. With this insight from the Everything Engine, humans now have a non-biased way to rank the personal success of others. Have they learned the true benefits of a cooperative reality, or are they still lost in the archaic master-slave reality? This is a valid and relevant question that we are currently struggling to balance and verify, not just in ourselves, but in our leaders. Which isn't awesome if you remember that those leaders are our elected officials, who are making laws based on their private understanding of reality. We do have a right to hold them accountable if we can figure out how to make a legal argument out of it. Let's talk about how the aspects are ruled by the master and slave relationships. This defines a very important physical process: getting the Everything Engine up and running. I've hinted already at a boot sequence, and it is this physical process that will allow us to define the linear process that occurs before the rotational one takes over. What is the physical boot sequence for humans? Well, most people know where babies come from and can even do a search about the cellular developmental process. There is a fascinating illusion and controversy here as well. What has been controversial has been one of my favorite science phrases since I heard it. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. This was a controversial idea, and when I explain what each of these words means, you might understand why this theory was mistakenly devolved from a law down to the bowels of mythology. This is a revival of some secret rebel science knowledge. Ontogeny just means the development of an organism from its earliest stages to maturity. Right, nothing offensive so far. Just talking about babies. Recapitulates is just a fancy word for projecting a repeating pattern. So, we have a developing organism doing so because of a pattern. We've been talking about patterns for most of this series. Again, not very offensive, just talking about making lots of babies. Phylogeny refers to the evolutionary pattern of development that went into an organism previously to get it to where it is now. This is where creationists historically have a breakdown and start working to discredit this theory, which is what happened over 100 years ago. Babies, they believed, never evolved from monkeys. Phylogeny was the idea that our evolutionary process, those embedded steps that went into our growing complexity, would also be made manifest during the initial growth cycle. This seemed to be completely illogical to the creationist side of the debate, despite the fact that various animal fetuses during cellular development do tend to look similar, like really similar. In this image, you are seeing various animals during cellular development. A fish, turtle, chicken, pig, and a human. If you look at the pig and human, they are very similar, and for a while, a pig fetus looks more human than a human fetus does. You should be able to see that this is indeed completely logical because the math agrees. So a human boot sequence would be a logic sequence based on the embedded steps that showed all that went into it. And this is visually exactly what we have here. See, we have stumbled across another illusion the everything engine can help solve. Is evolution an offensive process? No. Instead, evolution is what is inverse and opposite to entropy. It is the balancing, creating, evolving force across from the destructive, neutralizing, entropic force. Entropy is about getting everything back down to a neutral and total thermo equilibrium. In the next chapter, the everything engine finally walks us through the boot sequence and the fine points of perspective.